G'day, art fundamentalists. Bill Suddick here with our weekly topic, and today's topic, or this week's topic, and we're into week 4, which is essentially a third of the way through the program. I'm sorry, a third of the way through the semester. The program goes on for another semester. I'm confused. All right, so what I want to cover today is value. We give you value, I must say. So first things first, simple wash technique, and that involves water. And I poured a bit of water in here. I don't know if you can see that, but I've got a nice little mixing tray. There's all kinds you can get out there. This one's covered in paint because I paint with it as well, but these are very convenient. You can also get palette pads that are basically it's wax paper type of thing that you can mix your paints on, and they're disposable, so you can get rid of them. So what I'm going to do is simply add a little bit of ink to the water, and I'm going to paint this guy very quickly. Just roughed in a guy. It looks a bit like Mike Tyson, but he's not. I think he's Russian. Anyway, you can use a couple of different types of ink. This one is Bombay Black India ink by Dr. P.H. Martins, and it produces a nice dense black, and it takes water well, produces a very nice gray. So which one do I want to use? I tend to prefer a more of a sepia wash, which is essentially, this is called Antelope. It's an FW Indian ink, and it's acrylic. Let's tell you what, let's try this first. All right, so I'm just going to put a little bit in there. And it doesn't take much to create a nice flat wash. Generally what I do with my washes is I put a light layer on first. Now I'm going to use a number 6 brush. Let's just mix that up. I don't want to put my wash on too dark, okay? Now the paper that I'm working on is quite a thick Arches watercolor paper. Now that's awfully light, which is not going to be too impressive for the demo. So what I'm going to do, of course, is add a little bit more. And you can see that I've put quite a bit of water in there. And I don't plan to be applying washes all day today. So let's get a little bit more ink in there. There we go. That should do it. So what I like about the wash is that it's very spontaneous. It's fast. You get instant results. It's beautifully done. The problem with wash, though, is it takes a certain type of reproduction to print it if that is the end point of your artwork. And you can see that it's a pretty good gray, not overly dark. So what I'm going to do is fill up my brush, try it again. Now, I'm going to keep this on hand. I don't think I'll need it, but I'm just using a paper towel here. So what I'm going to do is just shade this guy. We're going to determine that the light source is coming from this direction. So let's find the planes, essentially. And there's probably shadow under his eyes, on this side of the face, cheekbones, this side of the nose. Now you see that it's going on fairly lightly. I'm going to continue to pick up some pigment in my brush. All those areas that are underneath, that are in shadow, are going to get the gray. There's some there. There's some in that cheek. Let's put this on here. Little shade on the neck and defining the muscle. There's going to be a cast shadow under there too, so let's slap that on. This is what I like about wash. You can really just spontaneously slap it on. Now the beauty of watercolor inks, which is what I'm using here, is that once it's dry, and that makes it a little bit labor intensive, and you have to sort of play a waiting game, but once it's dry, now I can go in wet on wet with a darker value, and I can spread it around. But what I want to demonstrate this part to you, whereby we wait for it to dry. And let's see, this is I want to give this guy a really big brow ridge. Now, if by chance that I put some paint on there in an area that I don't like, or ink, it's not paint per se, I just blot it up with the paper towel. What I'm going to do is add a section there just to show a slight indent, I guess, so that the brow ridge sticks out even more. There's a cast shadow under the nose. So now we wait. Cue the music. Let's play with this guy. This guy is basically an armature for a plasticine sculpture. And it's flexible. This is craft wire. You guys will be doing this or something similar to this in the second semester. So you can bend the craft wire. I've bulked it out in this case with styrofoam. It's going to be covered in plasticine. All right, the legs are a little bit different. They're twisted, thinner wire, and these have to be a little bit more flexible to move. So there you go. All right, are we dry yet? Probably not. This is pretty much dry. So what I'm going to do is simply use the same value, and I'm hoping it's completely dry. It's probably not. This looks dry here. Should really give it a good amount of time to dry it. Otherwise, you're going to make a mess. But let's try this. And we're back. So what I'm going to do here is I've basically taken exactly the same value that was in this little vat of color here, and I'm going to apply that over the first layer, and you can see what happens. It darkens it up. It basically doubles the value. So I can go in and add shadow where I want it to go, and it basically doubles it up. Now I can keep repeating that, building up the tonal value gradually. So by doing so, I can create very subtle changes in tonal value and smooth it out even. So I can create some very soft gradations between the dark and the medium tone. And notice I'm leaving a fair bit solid white just so the highlights really pop out of there. And if I want to, if I want to speed things up, I simply add a little bit more ink to the water. Sometimes you don't want to wait. You just want to get it done, right? So let's do that. In fact, you know what I'm going to do this time? I'm going to put a little bit of the Bombay black India ink in there, and let's see what happens. Now this stuff is quite potent. One drop. I put in two. Look out. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's almost, look at how dark that is. My goodness. You don't need much of it, so it's considerably darker. I might want to thin that out a bit. But I'm going to notice here there's a little bit of wet in there. What I'm going to do is go into that wet area. This is called wet on wet, and let's see what happens. It actually helps you kind of spread it around. And you might want to add a bit more water. In fact, let's get some clean water here. It's always good to have some clean water on hand, just so you can, if you want to thin out the edges and have that towel ready. You can see how you can lighten that up and then very quickly just blot. And it softens those hard lines. Now, some people like the hard lines. So there's not much pigment in that particular brush stroke, but that's okay. This is wet, so I can spread out the ink. This is not wet, so we use that gradual layering effect. And I can build that up. Let's see how much. That's a lot on my brush. Let's thin it. I'm going to put a bit more shadow on the side of the nose there, and so on and so forth. And if I want to soften that, I simply touch it with the paper towel. And this is quite effective, and it works well. So that is phase 1 of our value lesson. And we're going to move on to the next phase in just a second.